You want
the
to die
business.
with dignity is what you're saying.
I'm not dying with any dignity. I'm winning, baby. Totally winning. The body count behind me between the NFL, the NHL, the NCAA, the Justice Department, everything, you're like, don't bet against me.
Welcome everybody for a special episode 200. Can't believe it's been 200 episodes. It's mainly credit to Jake, but we're keeping the tradition going and lots of great gambling content here for all your podcast needs. Today, I'm joined by Joe Brennan. He's the executive chairman of Prime Sports, and he is very opinionated and has probably one of the best voices that I've come across in sports betting. I really want to highlight how great this voice is, and we could be talking about stacking pieces of paper, and I think it would be interesting to listen to.
All right. You just did what you're supposed to in the book. You totally disarmed me. You appealed to my intellectual vanity. That my dream that someday I could be the next James Earl Jones as the voice of Darth Vader. I mean, you're hitting all the erogenous zones here right now.
Well, I think I'm calling it as I see it. And speaking of Darth Vader, I just watched that with my son, and man, in 2024, it's still such a great movie. They've aged so well.
My 8-year-old, this is a spread. So we just celebrated my oldest. She's 22, and my youngest is 8, and both of them still love Star Wars. So it's great. There's comedy in our household. But yeah, my 8-year-old came in and woke me up on Saturday morning, and she pointed a lightsaber at me, and she's like, "Do you know what this is?" I'm like, "Yes, I know what that is." But please don't point the business end of a lightsaber at Daddy when he's just waiting.
Has she gone to the dark side, or she still is there?
She
still
has not. No.
Okay.
Thankfully,
there's good in her yet.
Straight Jedi. She's a big fan of the Ahsoka series. She's already talking about being Ahsoka for next Halloween. My wife, who's usually tasked with coming up with that level of creativity, because God knows it's not me, is already trying to figure out how she drapes our daughter with orange tentacles. So yeah, it's all good stuff.
So Prime Sports, it kind of makes me think of either a steak restaurant or Deion Sanders kind of sports betting. So
it's funny that you say that, because when we first had opened up the live environment, the production environment, the first question that our member services got on chat was, "Do you guys serve filet mignon?" And I wanted to get T-shirts made for them. That's Prime Sports, and in the back, "Do you guys serve filet mignon?" It's perfect.
The best steak with a side of sports bet.
And as far as Amazon, I mean, I've talked you've probably talked to the AWS guys, because they're considering getting into gaming. How do they package up their hosting, their geo, which you already have, and other things. And when I met with Jason Mills, who's the head of their practice, he kept asking, "So what's your consumer brand going to be?" But now I'd be thrilled to death if they sued us, and that they covered it on the front page of Jeffrey Bezos's newspaper, Washington Post. That would be worth just millions to us now, wouldn't it?
Yeah, fantastic. So I listened to your podcast that you did with Jesse about the background, so we don't need to repeat that. If those of you that don't know the background of Prime, Google Joe, and the podcast on betting startups was a pretty good basis. But why don't you just sort of to kick us off here, what on a high level, what do you think is missing? I think you talked about there's a McDonald's and Burger King in the industry, but not to riff on the restaurant theme too much, but what do you think is missing in the culinary offering of sports betting?
Let's not riff on the restaurants, but what's missing in the culinary offering? Okay.
What restaurant do you want Prime Sports to be?
Capitol Grill, I guess. It's probably the best way of putting it,
So overpriced steak.
Dude, what? $75 for a tomahawk ribeye? That's a bargain. No, I guess if we're going to stay with the hamburger metaphor, and we're going to beat up on FanDuel and DraftKings and call them the Burger King and McDonald's of sports betting, we would probably say, identify more with Five Guys. Better service, better premium. The menu, we're not trying to have the deepest menu possible, because most of the menu's bullshit. You probably know this from your own offering. Like in your core market in the UK, it's all like, oh, well, we've got 5,000 markets. We've got 3,000 markets. We got 25,000. Yeah, well, every time you count like a single line item in your derivative market for alternative goal scorers and things like that, and that's a single market, like, come on, how much action are you taking on that? It's very long tail. Still better than 80% of the handle in America comes in on sides, totals, and spreads, right? So we've mastered that. We're going deeper than that. I have gone deeper, but we offer markets that people play, not just for window dressing. And we offer markets that we know from experience garner enough handle to justify the risk, because we got into this business not to become a sports entertainment thing or an engagement play or to get 1 million registrations and downloads. It's like, well, we got into this business to make money like bookies. So it's a question of liquidity for us, like not how many people downloaded us, but how many dollars are being played. It sounds so contrarian nowadays, doesn't it? So old fashioned, but I guess we're kind of back to the future. And at 55, I mean, probably the biggest thing without going too much into the background is we quoted when we were working on the lobbying for this in like New Jersey and elsewhere over that 10 years, we quoted a potential American sports betting market that was based on that offshore street market and what those numbers were. It's the same estimates that you saw like in the 1997 gambling impact study that was done during the Clinton administration. Now we're getting really wonky. And to then, when the market opens up there in 2018 and to completely bypass that type of model that built those numbers that everybody was quoted on. So you bypass this American model of sports betting in favor of this more UK, EU style of bookmaking. For me, at least, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance in that, especially because it wasn't like they invented sports betting May 2018 and brought it to America. Prometheus did not bring us fire. We already had plenty of sports betting, as you're probably aware. I mean, you went to Northwestern, right? I've known a couple of college bookies up there. And
go Cats.
And you go, Big Ten, smartest school, baby. Should probably be in the Ivy League.
Don't say that to the Michigan guys. They get kind of twitchy about that.
Well, my niece is a varsity soccer player at the University of Michigan. It's caused a lot of disruption in our family, but that's because we are Notre Dame fans through and through. Anyway, I diverge.
It's cool she went to the second best Big Ten school.
Well, then I have a niece who's at Wisconsin, but the best all around school. Anyway,
yes.
What's missing is
best Halloween party. Madison's famous.
Best history of campus radicals, I guess. I don't know.
Yes.
What's missing is that piece that this market was quoted on and that was already here and that it actually still exists. Like, so we've had this massive explosion in this brand new recreational sports betting marketplace, but it has largely been based on new players because you still have a really huge chunk of those players that were playing offshore or playing on the street, like PPH guys, your corner bookie, that's where they're still playing. And it's for a number of reasons, but that's where they're at. And so the opportunity that we're looking for is we're not looking to go and clip off the lower hanging fruit from FanDuel and DraftKings and MGM and Caesars. We're looking to be that regulated market alternative to, Bet Online and Bovada and, shops like that. My partner, Adam Bjorn, who's an incredibly experienced bookmaker, in his estimation, for every dollar that's bet in the regulated U.S. marketplace, you still have another dollar, even two, that's being bet in unregulated forums. And that's where there's a lot of opportunity for us.
Right. So going back to the Five Guys metaphor, because I think it's quite interesting. Five Guys menu is quite simple. You can pick the ingredients, but there's not that many sandwiches and you can kind of see it on two boards. So you're kind of saying back to that classic bookmaking, have a really strong core. You think that is sort of the recipe that is missing in this space where everything is frilly and silly?
Because it's frilly and silly. It's that there's no prioritization. It amazes me the number of times that I go to the homepage for FanDuel or DraftKings or another one of the shops, and you see their in-running menu, and it's focused on, that real heater matchup in the Macedonian under-19 football league between two teams with many consonants and no vowels in their names. It's not that I'm saying like, hey, we're Americans, we should live in a bubble and not take an interest in Central Europe.
There's a few vowels.
They're currently not a whole lot of interest, but there is an awful lot of interest in what are the markets tonight for NBA or college basketball, things like that. And really establish your ground game through having a really good understanding and serve them the American sports that they like. Serve them the markets that they really, really like and be very, very good at, instead of saying like, well, we've got a blizzard of everything and, and it's up to you to decide. I have listened to a couple of your podcasts because I always think you should respect somebody and do some research and everything. And I find out that you are a fan of Costco. Outstanding. I was resisting Costco for years because I thought it was insulting that I'd have to pay money to spend money. But then I had $1.50 hot dog and Coke, and it was like road to Damascus moment. There was no getting me back on that horse.
It's an event. I mean, I have 3 young kids, and it's our Saturday. We're all excited to go to Costco. I'm excited to see what they have new and fresh, and that's exciting.
When you go into Costco, there is like light organization. The TVs are going to be there right when you come in. And it's amazing that I ever get in and out of there without buying yet another $1,000 Jumbotron for our household. The number one regulator on that is my wife. So like I want to do things with the walls, and it's not Jumbotrons. But there's no focus to Costco. It really is like, do as thou wilt, right?
Yes.
And that's, I think, problematic. Because even when you're an experienced Costco shopper, like you and I are, you'll still say like, okay, well, today I need, like, do these guys have hot chocolate? And if there's hot chocolate, where the fuck do I go get hot chocolate? Don't talk that way in front of the kids.
You can swear in front of my kids. It's fine.
So anyway, so there's a lack of focus. But for
I'm going to push back on you here, Joe. I want to give credit to, I think it was a Wall Street Journal video that was sort of deconstructing the magic of Costco. And basically what they said was there's no aisle labels. To your point, the TVs are always in the front, but they do that on purpose so that you get this really sort of circuitous discovery mode. And then they also have a bunch of surprise and delight stuff. Now, to your point, they will be missing. Like I live in the UK, so I'm looking for Skippy peanut butter, which is hard to find in this country. And sometimes they have it, sometimes they don't. So I'm really disappointed.
Care package if you like. I mean, I'm in favor of air traps.
Please send me some Skippy. So I get quite disappointed. And my wife is French, so we also pay attention to things like good cheese and good meat and stuff that...
How did that happen? An American marries a French woman. I understand that appeal. But
yes.
you settle on England? Wow.
Well, if you listen to enough podcasts,
she really must be a saint.
She quite likes the UK because it's a nice mix between Anglo-Saxon culture and European sensibilities. So it's kind of a magic middle ground. I'm actually the one that doesn't like living in the UK because the weather is absolutely dog shit here. Like it's awful.
Yeah, but aren't you from I was trying to discern where you were from. Aren't you from Connecticut or something like that?
I grew up East Coast, yeah, but then went to Northwestern and lived in LA as well. So I've been all over.
So yeah, that typical I remember when I was graduating from high school and you ask guys hey, what are you going to do? I'm like, I'm going to California. I'm like, that's not a degree program. That's a lifestyle, but
To my credit, I went to California when I was 38. So I had my shit together before I did my California phase.
38, you don't even look like you're 24. On your notion about Costco and the discovery, that's great for Costco. Okay, it's a good draw for Costco. It's not necessarily the best experience for the customer because you're looking for Skippy peanut butter, right?
Yeah.
So
I think the argument to defend my fellow European bookmakers who you want to malign a little bit, I think the issue is everybody has their the idea of having many markets is everybody has their Skippy peanut butter of sports betting. Like I want to bet on corners, blah blah blah. And if you don't have that, I'm going to go to the place that has it. It's a little bit like the Amazon long tail strategy of trying to have every book in their catalog so that when you buy Harry Potter, you want to buy it with Amazon and not Barnes & Noble or somebody else. So I think it's not just sort of a throw everything up against the wall and see what sticks. I think there is some logic behind the long tail strategy.
Yeah. What I would say is they've not curated well local. It's okay to say,
I totally agree with that.
We want to have this offering so that people, we do. I mean, people have probably heard me since launch. They probably think I have some dastardly card up my sleeve on this one, but I constantly talk about how, like, I don't know why there aren't more cricket bettors in the United States. And, I'm constantly going on, like, if you went today, I don't think we have any cricket markets up today. I don't know if we do or we don't.
Yeah.
But
it's kind of a weird sport, but
it is a weird sport. I mean, I'm American. I grew up in Philadelphia, and it's like, as far as prior to this, my cricket to me was a bunch of guys in sweater vests drinking gin and tonics, swinging canoe paddles at one another. They play for 5 days and it ends in a tie. That's stupid. But
any cucumber sandwiches.
T20s, limited over leagues, the Indian Premier League. I mean, what I love about the Indian Premier League, it seems like it's all the worst stuff that you can take from American sports and WWE, and you pack it into this traditional game with this incredibly crazy audience. But on the more serious side, is like, look, if you run into so many people here in America, like when we go to, like, Bet Bash and things like that, and you talk to players and they're like, well, I'm a quant. It's kind of like saying I'm vegan or I graduated from Harvard. It's something that they want to get up front. Like, that's how I think about the world. That's my organizing principle. I'm a quant. Like, well, if you're a quant, you should be betting cricket. Why? Because there are so many data sets that are available out there for cricket. And if you can model for baseball, you can model for cricket, or you should be. And there's so much global liquidity in cricket. It's the second most watched sport on the planet after soccer, or what people over in your neck of the woods insist on calling football. What is wrong with
I still say soccer.
Good for you. Rage against the dying of the light, my friend. Anyway, so we want to do things to kind of encourage that, not because we're necessarily such big fans of cricket, but it's more of we're trying to appeal to guys who are either already, we'll say, pro-ish, or aspiring. And we think that because of the limits that we're willing to take on sports like that it's worth, the juice is worth the squeeze if they put in a little bit of extra time, and that their seasons don't just end, in October when the World Series, October, the beginning of November when the World Series is over, that there's other events that they can be taken advantage of, leveraging their models, their skills in other things, which we think is good for encouraging the growth of our overall audience in our business. But there's some curation that's going to have to be involved. There's going to be some leading that's going to have to be involved. It's not just like, we threw it all on the page. Like, I used to look at William Hill's front page or Ladbrokes front page in the UK, and you'd be like, I don't know where the fuck to go. To me, that was like being in the most cognitively dissonant Costco or Walmart that I've ever been in. It's like, they've got everything and I have no idea where to go to find it. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of, so we know what American audiences in general, where the high volume goes, both from a sport and from a market perspective. And so that's what we're focused on now. And what we're going to do is there's a plan it's all part of the plan, right? To kind of grow this thing. You don't have to do everything at once. You can grow, especially because we're not taking public dollars yet. And I don't have any VC shops standing on my shoulder saying like, well, why aren't you doing this? And why aren't you doing that? Like, we can take our time and walk rather than run to our death and do things in a kind of sensible, thoughtful way. Grow.
You want to die with dignity is what you're saying.
I'm not dying with any dignity. I'm winning, baby. Totally winning. The body count behind me between the NFL, the NHL, the NCAA, the Justice Department, everything, you're like, don't bet against me.
I got a black book. So I heard on the other podcast you were talking about these European operators who are coming into the United States. But before we get to that point, I want to say that Americans have, and I say this as an American, but like,
I was about to remind you of that. Yes.
We are so blinkered, like all these, to your point about like, why don't these American bettors bet cricket? Like 100%. And I had so many conversations with pro-American bettors 2018. So like, it's kind of a moot now, but I was like, why don't you move to London and bet on all the, like, cause the world is open to you to bet from London. And, it just sort of like never occurs to Americans that there's a world outside of New York and California sometimes.
Hang, that's all right. That
No?
sounds like
Too
the
far?
typical American. That sounds like the typical American expatriate. Like you're already, like you're saying you're an American, but you're also like when I used to travel, I used to say like when I would go overseas, I would
When
talk
you
with
go
people
to
about
Kansas?
nothing. It's no, like when I would go to London, or I'd go to Paris or
Yeah.
Copenhagen or someplace like that,
Okay.
or Barcelona or whatever, and I would joke, I say like, yeah, whenever I travel, I find it very easy to talk to people because they always want to talk about the world's two favorite sports. The first being soccer, which they insist on calling football, and the second being what's wrong with America. You will never find anybody over there or anywhere that does not have an opinion about what's wrong with America, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Heretofore, it's been really difficult to get interest in other sports simply because of really it's the broadcast nature of it. I mean, like we don't just broadcast football games. We now it's become like every weekend is Super Bowl weekend, right? Like I don't know how old you are. I am older
43.
than the hills. Okay, so I'm 55, so I've got a little time on you. But I remember when the Super Bowl broadcast, the pregame was an hour before the game. And that seemed like a really long time, and then you'd have a post game of like an hour and the game in between. And that was it. Now, just a garden variety NFL Sunday is 4 or 5 hours of pregame, 4 or 5 hours of postgame. It's everything. It just blots out the sun. And I think that's one of the difficulties for other sports to kind of get awareness is the nature of that. Now, there has been improved opportunities. Like Adam likes to talk about this. Within the last year, or last couple of years, you've had a rugby league, professional rugby league, start in the U.S. You've had professional cricket league, which has massive backing from a lot of technology CEOs that just started last year. So there are some opportunities, and God knows there's so many channels available, so many outlets. You can watch it if you want to, but now you got to kind of go find it. But the stuff that's being broadcast, it's being pushed, is still the traditional stuff. It's still football. It's still NBA. In a month from now, it's going to be my favorite carnival of lights, which is the men's NCAA basketball tournament, which I think is the best sporting event on the planet. And so getting people, there's already a small segment that is aware that there's a world beyond those shining lights, but getting, critical mass of casual bettors or whatever casual audiences looking beyond there, that's tough. It's kind of like the Winter and Summer Olympics events. It's not like they have figure skating once every 4 years or downhill skiing once every 4 years or the 100-meter dash once every 4 years. It's just that it's only once every 4 years. That's a big media event, right? Then we got to kind of get past that.
To your point about the NFL, I know it's hitting records now in terms of viewership, and it's just crushing it in terms of TV sponsorships and people paying attention.
Especially with Taylor Swift involved now. Oh my goodness.
Taylor Swift. But what I don't understand is who has time for this? And I don't believe that the young kids today are going to watch NFL in 20 years. So I'm kind of curious if we're at peak NFL because it's just too long. Nobody has time for that.
I think you're right about that. You already see fragmentation of the media, like where, I think it's not just whether you have the game on, but whether you're paying attention.
Yeah.
Right? And it's very difficult to keep people's attention on something. This is why, there are many challenges that are facing something like microbetting. I mean, oh God, it's amazing. First of all, talk about old wine in a new bottle. We've had spot betting for 30 more years than that, but now we call it microbetting. It's a brand new thing. But anyway, shout out to Simple Bet, right?
Every time I hear microbetting,
but I don't know. When you talk about like, oh, we're going to have markets on every pitch, and let's set aside a moment for the obvious technical challenges that you have there, from like the latency of the data and how long you can hold a market open in order to take on liquidity to make it worth the risk, right? People don't watch like that. anymore.
Yeah.
They have it on, but they're also doing things in the background. Like I have the games on, but even I'm sitting there, I'm on the phone, I'm looking at the numbers, I'm looking at Twitter, I'm getting yelled at by my wife. You're like life is going on and it's becoming more and more background. And why? Because it is so easy to go in and out of these things. They make it easy for us. The broadcasts make it easy by, if there's a serious play, they replay it 3 times. The scoring stuff, like all the leagues and all the media outlets, they chop that stuff up so quick that you can just watch on Twitter and you'll get updates and you'll see videos. You'll see a touchdown a minute after it happened, if that's the way that you want to consume media. So I do agree with you that it's going to be harder to keep young people interested in kind of the traditional models going forward, but there is time for evolution if you're thinking about it. I mean, and we're thinking about it. We don't want to just sit around and be like, oh, we're the smart old men. These young kids, they don't know what the hell they're doing. Not at all. But we also don't think that the answers are in market yet. There's still plenty of opportunity for innovation and for things to change.
So my big thing is price. Do you think I'm crazy about that, or are you big on price?
No. We're reduced juice shops, so our openers, you have to lay 108 instead of 110. That's perpetual for us. That's not just a special. Once we move to that, our volume has really taken off, and it's not necessarily the NFL volume, because the NFL is now starting to slow down, and college football, that went off a cliff right in December, and it's the middle of the week stuff. So it's NBA, college basketball, NHL, and having the reduced juice on that has really helped us really amp up our volume. This month, our January results are going to be really significant in moving us up the rankings here in Ohio. And it's right at a time where we're getting ready to launch in New Jersey and get exposure to that market. I share your thought, because I've seen this in a couple of your things about holding over 10% or holding over, we don't want to target it we only want to hold 2%. But I do think once you get to 4 or maybe 5, you're now hitting red line in the amount of money that you can hold back from your players. When you look at these margins that are being stoked upward by SGPs, that they're looking at 10, 15, 20% margins that they want to hold. It's that's too much money. That's way too much money to be taken out and to keep the players interested. Perfect example is how you look at losing. Yesterday, we got annihilated on NFL Championship Sunday. We really took a beating. F you, Detroit. Right? But when we came in, we found out but some of the guys who were behind to us the most, who have been losing the most, they're the guys who made out. They did. And I'm like, that's great. That's great. Then, whatever we lost to them is great retention marketing. It's great CRM, because, even the people who are high limit losers and all, you got to keep them happy. And if they just feel like I can't beat this game, all I'm doing is I'm just stroking checks to DraftKings, FanDuel, or something like that. That I don't care what anybody says. That has a limited shelf life.
So in your world where, everybody's minus 110 and you're saying minus 108, and if I said minus 102, 103, do you think I'm crazy? Because to me, that when I say low,
you can do that in the US just based on the costs, which you now have exposure to, being in Indiana and Colorado. Just the costs that are associated with taking payments and, the KYC verification and geo and everything that's related. Well, you don't have any geo costs. Matter of fact, somebody on Twitter yesterday said, I should talk to you about geo. And I said, I'm going to be on his show tomorrow. Maybe you can make me.
What do you want to know?
I can't receive. Well, no, it's funny. We talked about doing our own geo as well, but it was more of, what do you want to focus on right now when you're trying to launch, right? You have finite dev resources. We could do you guys, we do our own geo. Is that what we want to focus our resources on right now? No. Will we go back and potentially backfill it? Yeah, maybe.
It's one of those things though, once you kind of get stuck, you never go back and revisit it. So that's why the
You know
companies
what?
like GeoComplies make so much money.
You know what? If all you're thinking about is like acquisitions and everything like that, and how do we drive more revenue if you're that organization, yeah. But one thing that we are trying to do is we are trying to create space for the Minority Report here, because you can always do things better. And a dollar that I don't spend is is just as good as a dollar earned. We spend a lot on geo. We spend a lot on payment processing costs, things like that. That's why, coming back to the point that you were trying to make, there is a threshold. Like I heard you when you were talking with Paris about Pinnacle. 104. I don't think that economically is feasible, but we can go. I think for us, if we want to, whether for situationally for a certain player, or if we want to have a special, we could probably go as low as 105 and still be able to be profitable. Okay. But beyond that, it's really not in the traditional bookmaking sense. I don't think it's really doable. Now, for an exchange, like what you guys are doing and like Sport Trade and Profit, and you wonder why isn't Betfair out there? But they aren't. What they do as far as the exchange commission rate, yeah, you guys could probably go down to like 2%, maybe even lower on the volume, and it'd still be viable for you. Okay. But then you start getting into all those questions like, all right, well, who's going to bring you your liquidity? Right. And it's really, they're two different businesses. Being in the exchange business and being a bookie, it's two different businesses.
I do them both.
Congratulations, man.
Thank you. So, I mean, I guess I sort of hear what you're saying about the marginal cost of, as you get closer to 100, it gets harder and harder. And you're sort of saying your red line is 104, 105. And there's definitely a red line in there, because at least you have 25 basis points for the federal excise tax that kicks in at some point, or at every point, really.
Yeah.
But I think that, I mean, I hope we're the company that does it, but my hypothesis is that somebody's going to come along. Who knows if it's Google, Amazon, Smarkets, whoever, but that will come up with a low margin model. And all these sort of traditional sports books are just going to, they won't be able to compete, because they are paying X million to GeoComply and 5% for payment processing and da-da-da-da-da-da. I was talking to one bookmaker, and he was talking to me about all the fees that he had to pay. And it adds up. So what I think is interesting is there's room for a tech company to either, I guess, do it at cost or near at cost and underprice everybody and really wipe the legs out of the industry. And that's basically our business plan. And when you hear that, do you think like, holy shit, like,
I'm thinking
that's
I got to put a
interesting?
bullet in you today? Is that what you're going to?
You're not really supposed to threaten murder to the host on podcasts.
I'm in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. That is exactly what is expected of me, man. What are you talking about?
Go to the mall.
It's like a mile and a half down, baby.
I know it. I know that's what Cherry Hill is known for. I used to live in Yardley, by the way, which is up the river.
Okay, yeah. My brother used to live up that way in New Hope. Yeah. So yeah,
nice. But yeah, so what do you think? You think it's not possible, or good?
Oh, of course, I think it's possible. Of course, I do.
Yeah.
I mean, you've had Wave 1.0, right? And Wave 1.0 was mainly a just get live phase, right? Are the companies that are currently the market leaders the ones who are doing it best, or were they the ones who were able to just get to critical mass faster? Having a long history, prior to this, like I've worked for some now extinct tech dinosaurs. And the one that I think about is AOL. Okay. And when I think of FanDuel and I think of DraftKings, the sole reason why they are where they are today is the database that they had of deposited DFS players. That's it. And in my mind, that is like the CDs that AOL used to tack onto everything. It'd be on magazines, on hamburgers, at the drive-thru at McDonald's, all over it. You couldn't go anywhere without finding one of those damn CDs. And it just made it like that in order to get people on the internet, like back when that used to be actually a thing. Right. So, but obviously AOL's, I live 2 miles from AOL headquarters. It's being leveled right now. The building that I worked in, and it's being turned into a data center, because everything in Ashburn, Virginia is being turned into a data center now. And that's because eventually the market rationalized. In AOL's case, it was, we got everybody on, but once they got here, they suddenly realized they wanted to have more control over their experience. So we found at one point in doing consumer research that 75% of the people who logged on to AOL, and AOL had that desktop walled garden, had a browser search, it had everything you needed, right? Well, they would just reduce that after they logged on, and they would open up like Internet Explorer or Netscape or Firefox or something like that. And in the research, you ask people like, well, why did you do that? And they say like, well, that's the real internet. Like, you can't fight that.
Yeah.
They weren't saying that it was a better product or anything like that. It was this perception like, well, because the other thing's real. And that is something that if you're FanDuel or DraftKings or anybody out there is, we know what you want to shove down the throats of players right now. Right now it's SGPs. To me, they're making themselves into lottery companies, which is fine. Say you're a sports lottery company. Don't say you're a bookmaker. But eventually consumer sentiment is going to go, it's going to trend somewhere. And all the assumptions that people make about consumers right now, bettors right now, that convenience is more important than price, or that they're loyal to one brand or one app or something like that. I guarantee you, just based on past history, that stuff is going to get wiped away. And so I don't know who it is. Is it us? God, I hope so. But is it our current offering that, becomes the all dominating, Attila the Hun horde that takes over the entire industry? Not at present moment, but there will be something, whether it's a technological change, product change, whatever it may be, that is just going to wipe away these early leaders in a way that you'll be talking about in the same way people talk about MySpace and Friendster. Oh yeah. I remember that. Or AOL. I remember those. You'll be laughing.
I couldn't agree more. Like I don't see FanDuel and DraftKings saying 1 and 2 for, in the next 10 years. Like I think in 10 years from now, we'll look at a very much different industry and landscape. So as somebody that, is not short of opinions, is there anything, since you're talking to another fellow operator here, that you think that we should have done differently or taken a different strategy?
I don't know why you went to Colorado and Indiana. I don't think it was a cultural fit or a market fit for your company. I would have gone straight to New Jersey.
We did go straight to New Jersey, and we spent a long time with Mr. Dennis, and we almost came up with a deal to do New Jersey. And for one reason or another, it fell apart. I think we just sort of got deal malaise, and we just ended up not doing it.
Are you talking about Dennis Drazen?
Yeah. We almost did a deal. I went out and visited him at the race course, and he's a very nice man. And it didn't materialize. And Colorado and Indiana it was opportunistic, really. It wasn't some big strategy.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes reality sets in. So, yeah, whatever. But
in hindsight, I probably wish I did New Jersey just to sort of be in the arena more. But I think we're losing in Colorado and Indiana, so I don't think we need to be in New Jersey to know what we need to improve. Like
I don't
going
think
from
it's
A to B.
I mean, it's like your core product is being an exchange, really. That's what sets you apart from all the other. I mean, you may have fixed odds sports betting, but so does everybody else. Your differentiator is that you're committed to the exchange model.
Technically, exchanges are fixed odds too, by the way.
Yeah, but you're not a bookmaker in the exchange. You are a facilitator. You're charging a facilitation charge.
We're also a major participant.
Well, that's fine. But I mean, in that regard,
it is an open market,
similar to a poker operator, right?
Yeah.
Than you do have with a traditional bookmaker, right?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
But I mean, there was only one state that was going to be a potential, good host to you, a good audience for you. And with being so close, between New York City and Philadelphia, and then also its proximity to Boston and DC and Baltimore, you just had a good region.
Cherry Hill.
That you could draw from. Cherry Hill, New Jersey. I mean, don't underestimate Cherry Hill, New Jersey. I'll tell you a story about a guy from Cherry Hill.
It's the Miami of.
No, after this one, I'm going to tell you about a player from Cherry Hill, and you're going to be like, fuck, why is that player? But anyway, we're having this debate about acquisitions right now and things like that. We have obviously we're very opinionated. I'm not the only one. I'm actually not as opinionated as Adam. it's what customers do we really want, right? And what customers can we really acquire and then also defend? Because that's just as important. Like, you can get somebody, but are they going to stay with you? Why would they stay with you? Is it like a product? Is it an offer? What is it? So we're having this debate here right now, but you certainly don't want to go someplace that has a very low percentage of what you would consider your ideal customers. And no offense to Indiana, where I have a couple of nieces and nephews who are at Notre Dame, and no offense to Colorado, where my sister has lived for 20 years, but she wouldn't bet. I was joking with Alex Kane from Sport Trade when he told me during the summer that they were going to go open up in Colorado. I said, like, why the hell are you doing that? You don't want to be taking bets on sports in a place that when the weather gets cold and crappy, people go outside. That's why they live there. Like, you want people who are sitting inside cowering away from those snowstorms saying like, damn, I got to hit those in-game, bets on, NFL, college basketball, whatever. So, look, hindsight's 2020, but an exchange right now only kind of makes sense in New Jersey because they will let you run your model. So somebody tell the Novig guys this too. I mean, they did go to Harvard. They should understand that. But being an exchange,
hopefully they're listening to the podcast and they'll move states.
Sure that everybody listens to your podcast, don't they? That's how I was sold on it, right?
Yep. We decided to not abandon the exchange. That's the wrong posturing, but basically, I'm trying to think, not mothball. I'm trying to think of a restaurant metaphor, but if you think about finance, whether you're trading with Charles Schwab or directly at the exchange, but everything gets routed to the exchange and
Morgan Stanley.
And we looked at the UK market is 90% sportsbook, 10% exchange. So we said, let's take exchange prices and put it in a sportsbook product. And that's why we kind of led with the sportsbook foot in the United States rather than the exchange. So I still think there's merit in that, but I think at some point you're kind of going to get, Robin Hood-y, sportsbooky features that start to converge into one platform.
And you may be right. But the one thing to keep in mind about those, that like wealth of people who made it onto the Robinhood platform, particularly during COVID shut-in time, the ones who really got into it, what did they do? They then migrated away from Robinhood because they're like kind of similar to what I was saying about the people who were minimizing their AOL window and opening up a Internet Explorer browser. It's like the Robinhood people who became like successful and more adept. They wanted to go in search of what? The real thing. And the real thing was what? It wasn't Robinhood. I think Robinhood was cool. Actually, I set up an account for my son that I totally forgot about because I put it in my name. And then when I was doing one of my state licensing applications, I didn't list it because I totally forgot about it. Like, what's this Robinhood account here? Like, you mean the Robinhood account with $1,000 in it that had some really bad picks in it? Yeah, that's my son. That's him.
Very cool. Well, I really enjoyed the chat today, Joe, and good luck with Prime.
Thank you very much. Good luck.
Do you say Prime Sports or Prime or PS?
You know what? I'm kind of like letting the public decide. Like, what Prime Sports is our brand, but we sure seem to be very quickly migrating to Prime, just like how Circa Sports just quickly became Circa. The sooner you become one word, the better. Madonna, right? Prince, right?
There you go. What do you want to be when you grow up? That's a question I like to ask all men.
I was waiting for
this question. Let's hear the answer.
I'm grown up. I'm 55. I'm grown up.
Never too late.
I'll tell you what. The only way I can really answer that one is to say, I just really want to leave everything on the field. I don't want to leave this thinking there was something else I could have done. There's something else I could have given to this effort, because this has been a long effort for me. If I look at when I really started seriously looking at doing this and taking steps, that was like 2002. It was 2008 when I jumped into New Jersey and started lobbying, and we started passing the law there, and the federal court fight started. So this has been a really long, slow burn. But it was necessary. But even now, it's so exciting to me every day. We got our brains beaten in last night, but there's just, you were in the securities industry before this too. There's just something about taking
Yeah.
like a multi-stick loss one day.
Makes
on
you
your
feel
play.
alive.
And you come back the next day and you just, the fact that you walk through the door and you're not cowed and you're like, let's go, let's fire them up. I'm telling everybody out there on the floor in the bullpen, I'm like, you should brag to your friends. We took this huge loss and our doors are still open. Like, oh my
For
God,
now,
that's
for now.
terrible. Like, what are you talking about? We're still in business. And the best part is we're still more or less in soft launch here. We haven't done any marketing. So the only guys that we have betting with us, like 90% of the people who are betting with us
Sharps.
are the assassins, the
Yeah.
syndicates, all the smarties, and that
Yeah.
we're making 2% hold against them. Man, let's start a parade. Let's have a parade down, Route 70 here in Cherry Hill. Everybody will wonder what the hell is going on, but it's like we held 2% against the assassins. That's outstanding. So
That
like
is
I said,
pretty good if you're in the black.
yeah. All I want to do, although who knows at the end of this month, as long as we come back, all I know is I just want to leave it all on the field. And so when I'm done with this, whenever it is, I can look back and just say, like, I did everything I absolutely could here. And I can feel satisfied.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing your thoughts, even though you were a little timid and it was hard to get them out of you today.
And, you did
nice
a good job of coaxing it out of me. I know I was anxious and quiet at first, but I really appreciate it getting it out of me there.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much.